Hey, Kathy, how are you? Nice to see you.
Hey, Jack, always great to be with you.
Yeah, you're one of my favorite people, as you know. And
Mutual.
oh, really, this makes my
Oh,
little
yes.
heart patter here. That's great. Well, I just wanted to have people in this conversation get to know you a little bit. And, you're an extraordinary person. And it's a little bit of intimidation for me to even talk with you publicly. I mean, you've been to the highest of the heavens and the deepest parts of the oceans. You've run the largest scientific organization on our planet, and it's amazing. But that's not really what I wanted to talk about this morning. Is I wanted people to actually get a little sense of who you are. And I don't know how to do that really, except just have a conversation. So you've got to talk now.
Well, that works for me. I appreciate the big buildup. My friends just say I'm a woman with extreme ups and downs. So a little bit of positive confirmation is always good.
That's good. Well, you deserve it.
But
That's
you
for sure.
you touched on, thank you. You touched on the organization I had the privilege of leading, NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. And NOAA fills a really important niche in my life because I have had these spectacular experiences. I got to make the first maps of a piece of the seafloor in the North Atlantic as a grad student. Then I got to fly in space. And those were, the one was an academic pursuit, the one was fulfilling scientific missions on behalf of others. And what really came to me out of that experience was a desire to be back here on Earth working in some way in particular that could make the vantage point of space, the perspective on the planet as a whole that we have nowadays, thanks to the space age, how to actually make that matter. Not just in the sense of I have cool pictures from my space missions that I can, show them to you, but in much more practical ways, because it is data from outer space in particular, added to a lot of research knowledge and in situ data that lets us have the wonders of our day, which are things like, weather forecasts that are worthwhile at 10 days out into the future. Do you know how long humankind has craved some foresight about what's coming at them in the world around them, the natural world? We have that. We have some pretty powerful pieces of that nowadays, and it's really just an extraordinary capacity. And I wanted to be somewhere at the nexus where the science and the data are turned into decision useful information that would matter to you as a decision maker. And that's really the essence of what NOAA does.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of Gil Grosner, who is still alive.
Yeah.
He ran the National Geographic, as you know, for
Yeah.
many, many years. And I think it was his great-grandfather was Alexander Graham
Yeah.
Bell. And he always promoted the idea that the National Geographic Society was about creating geographic knowledge through exploration and so on, and disseminating geographic knowledge through the magazine and film. But I always got excited because there's a third thing, which you really hit on, which is through your exploration, you created new knowledge, but you're really passionate about disseminating the geographic knowledge. And the third dimension is applying geographic knowledge. And to me, that's what a lot of our users that are listening do every day. They make it up that that's the purpose of their life,
That's right.
It's so exciting that you've done both sides in many ways.
Yeah, I really didn't. I loved going out to sea and being an oceanographer, but I felt very unsatisfied that whatever I learned, what data I gathered and whatever I learned, largely was just going onto the pages of a scientific journal. And maybe to be harvested and put into use somewhere down the road, or maybe not, one just didn't know. And I just craved to get closer to that interface. As you put it, it's not just the interface of have the data and put it out. I want to be at the interface where I can help broker the connections. What is it you're trying to decide? What kind of information might sharpen and improve your decisions? And what framework are you working in? I mean, I don't want to just mail you scientific journals. I want to try to understand the conversation you're trying to have with constituents, or the question that you're trying to answer, and slip the right dollop of information into that conversation in a way that almost accelerates your ability to use it, not just throw it over the fence and leave it to you to figure out how it might help.
Yeah, it's not simply applied science. It's really having that curiosity to do science, but also being conscious at the same time of its meaning on everything from like we're talking about today, biodiversity conservation, saving the last places, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
It's the Pasteur's quadrant of earth sciences, right? There is a purpose in mind for me, and that is to help humankind live more wisely and live well on this little planet. So live with less of a footprint, live with greater sustainability, and so on.
Yeah, I love that, seeing yourself as a being with a purposeful life. I mean, to me, that just gets me all chilly, you know, it chills. And you've done it, I mean, your whole life. You were a geologist originally, weren't you, when you first got started?
Yeah, actually, both my undergraduate and my PhD degrees were awarded by a geology department. But of course, I consider myself an oceanographer. Mm-hmm. Oceanography comes in 4 flavors, of course: the geology of the seafloor, the chemistry of the seawater, the physics of waves and tides and currents, and the biology of everything that lives in the ocean. But oceanography didn't really exist as an interdisciplinary science until the 70s, whereas geology, of course, goes back centuries. So not uncommon, if your interest was the geology and geophysics of the deep seafloor, it was not uncommon that your degrees technically came from a geology department.
You and I have talked once before about understanding. And I brought up this notion that as human beings, all of us, we don't know how to explain things very well. You know, doctors, when you go to your doctor, does he really explain? Or a lawyer, oh, geez, they don't really explain it, so that you, mere mortals like me, can understand it. And it seems to me that one of your big contributions has been that you know how to explain things that people like me can understand. And I mean, you've seen things that nobody else has ever seen. Or to use my phrase, you've seen what others didn't or don't or can't. I mean, what goes on in your head that allows you to explain things simply? Or what are the tools that you use to do this?
Well, one factor is codified in one of the great adages I took away from my time in the astronaut corps, and that is the reminder, the caution to don't be stuck in transmit. So that my operative word is always conversation. I can transmit what I know in the vocabulary I'm familiar with, and it'll be nothing but a puff of air to a lot of people. It's arcane vocabulary, it's full of acronyms or whatever. And so I may be very happily transmitting for 30 or 40 minutes, but the impact or value of what I've transmitted to whatever the audience is will probably be something between 0 and very low. Mm-hmm. And I'm not interested in just transmitting. I'm actually interested in exchanges that connect. You know, the etymology of the word conversation is converso, exchange with. And I think it also has a dimension of to change with each other through that exchange. So I try to be really thoughtful as I'm preparing an address or a talk or engaging with someone. My goal is to understand where you're starting. Mm-hmm. And what you're trying to do or know, and engage you there, hook with you, intersect you there, and then bring you along with me on a journey that my experiences can guide you through. But my motivation, certainly in this work we're talking about, my motivation is not just to be the expert and not just to be applauded or something, but to be sure our conversation moves my client, my friend, my audience, to some new insight that's valuable to them for their purposes, that helps them better answer a question, or come together as a community where you've got multiple competing interests around some now shared understanding of the place we live in and how it works on different levels. And with that shared understanding, maybe we can move forward together to some new solutions that make us a better community, or improve our lives in this community, or lessen our impact on the environment around us, and yet allow us to live well.
Yeah, there's so much that's going on in my mind. One of them is that conversation like you and I are having is a method of communication. And
it's a social technology.
It's a social technology.
I would argue it is the most important technology in human affairs.
Yet we know so much about it. We know so much about it, and we don't know so much about it. Like, in explaining things, there's no school that you go to that is focused on explaining. And as a result, you may have all kinds of specialist data that you throw together and you throw out. It's like motor mouthing content without context. And this is, I don't know, for me, geography is context and content. So it's underpinning science of all types and organizes the content in various ways. And I love this idea that conversation is a method of communication and a method of understanding, as opposed to presentations, which, by the way, our Federal Users Conference here is full of presentations, you know, content coming at you. But I think people get so much out of interacting with each other, whether it's one-on-one or watching you and I, for example, have a conversation about how you communicate. It's neat.
Well, one of the things I would say about the FedGIS conferences, I've only been to, I think, 2 of them. And yeah, there is a lot of sort of present, but I think something that you guys do a really superb job at with all of your speakers is there's a mindfulness about the purpose of those presentations and how they string together. And your keynotes often do a great job of sort of creating that context. So if you just hear a presentation from different speakers, it's like you have a mental framework that it fits in. So it's presentation's not a bad thing. I think it's just about how mindful is the speaker of the intention of the presentation. And if it's just glorify me, you know, I get 30 minutes on the podium and take some still photos of me so I can use them on my blog. If that's it, then phew, you know.
Yes. So what do you think's going on right now that you want to share with this group?
Oh, so many things going on right now. But, you know, what excites me still about, you know, all the projects you and I have shared and the work that you guys do. And I talked about this a couple of years ago at an Aspen Institute conference. You know, we all carry these things around nowadays. And so we have stock market information at sports scores and weather. I mean, you know, how many megabytes or terabytes of information of any of those things, pop music, chart standings, right at our fingertips. And what I want to do, and what you guys are in the process of doing, I want to get to where we have, you know, I want the world at my fingertips. Just as readily available as sports scores. I want to be able to hold the world in the palm of my hand, and not just the data again. Because again, you know, the apps we have nowadays, I can tailor that weather app, not to tell me what the satellite measured in raw data, but tell me about my weather where I am or where I'm going to travel, or tell me about the teams I care about. When are we going to have a sufficiently powerful digital twin of this little blue marble, to borrow your phrase, Jack, and then have it available to us on cell phones, on tablets, on laptops, like not just as portals into the massive data, because most human beings on the planet struggle to navigate portals into the massive data. Imagine having a portal into the server that holds all the baseball data. That's not what you're looking for. You're looking for, you know, the dollop of information that tells you about the Dodgers or the next World Series game. Look, how do we get more of that for this earth-based, earth-oriented information that fits more into individual interests, or, you know, the interests of a mayor, a councilman, a banker, a businessman, someone not skilled in the vocabulary and not skilled in the data interfaces, but wrestling with questions about road layout or development or, you know, a conservation easement. That's what I dream of, is that someday that's as conceptually accessible and as informationally accessible as our sports scores and our weather information is today.
I get it. It's like, okay, sometimes I talk about geospatial infrastructure. It's really geography on the web made available to any device, anywhere, anytime, to coin a phrase, an old phrase, or use it. This idea of wiring up the planet so that all of our measurements are openly available, like you did with the, what was that, at NOAA, the coast, that
Digital Coast.
Digital Coast thing, so that it becomes available. But it's not just making the data available, like you say, it's then able to integrate and overlay the data and model the data and visualize so that we begin to see the complexity of what natural systems in our world are really all about. I mean, you saw it from outer space. You see the context and the content and knew all of it coming together. So I think your little globe is so cool.
Well, and one of the coolest aspects of that experience from space, it's very much shared by the tools that you guys are building, is, first, if we were in orbit, first I would see, here's Africa. First I'd see some part of Africa from this angle, then right on top of it, and then receding the other way around. Mm-hmm. And that ability, as we all know, that ability to see something from multiple angles in a very fluent kind of way is a real accelerator of comprehension.
Yeah, it's maps. Visualization.
Yep.
It's kind of like a language in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
These story maps that are now becoming so popular, I think will take the raw measurements and integrate the data with the models and then let people tell stories about everything. But I'd like to conclude, I guess, with the question, Kathy, of what do you think our users, the people that are actually listening, can actually do at this point, what are in these next few years to accelerate the application of science in our government, in our world, actually?
Well, I think continuing the work at all the different scales that each of them is doing to populate this digital twin of our Earth is clearly one dimension of it. Mm-hmm. The natural planet is, several of those layers, but not all of the layers. So what about the social, the economic, the demographic, the built infrastructure, the regulatory and political dynamics or frameworks and where those intersect? And I guess the other thing I would say, and this is probably not very well formed yet and may not be very well put yet, but maybe keep thinking about this notion both of conversation and of about speaking, moving towards the language and the conceptual framework of the lay user. Mm-hmm. And so how, maybe even on a story map interface, for example, you've got the Challenger deep story maps on the screen behind you. So if I dive into that and I go through the content that you've built into that story map, boy, is there a way to coach me about some next question that might be interesting to explore, that I could explore with a query that's in a language I understand.
Yes.
And AI ought to be able to start helping us a lot with this, because I don't know how to ask the cell and reference in Latin long. And if you show me a menu this long of all the layers I could select, I probably don't know which layers are probably most relevant to a question that I put in simple English. Yes. But can we get to where I can put the question in simple English and with some heuristics and some, heuristics at AI? The best four to give you an insight about that question will merge right there, and suggestions maybe would pop up right here for, you might click these other three on and off and see what they show you. Something like that, which I think would just explode the number of people that were able to interact with GIS tools. And it's a step in this direction, right? It's in my, Jack, you can wander through all that stuff with a fluency that astonishes me, as all of your team can do. But how do I get to do that?
Yeah,
that would be really powerful.
And making it relevant for a small farmer, relevant for
right.
A conservationist in a small watershed, making it relevant for
right.
a small business person, as well as the big giants, is,
yeah.
I think, the big challenge. But it's extraordinary.
And that's now highly mediated as a services now, which is a good and valuable thing. I'm just curious about how disintermediated could it become, so that there were individual apps with a fair degree of power to them.
Well, to cap it off, what you're saying is that GIS professionals need to come from the end user's application.
Yeah.
And Roger Tomlinson used to talk about this, is figure out what the information products and the experiences are that are in the language of the person who's the receptacle to use it. And then work your way backwards. Don't just have it technology or data driven. But this is, as normal, Kathy, it's extraordinary talking with you. You've got the vision, you have the experience, you bring it all together for us in And I can't help but say thank you. Well, thank you immensely for both this conversation and also the amazing life that you live and have lived. It's an inspiration for all of us. Thank you, Kathy, so much.
Thank you, Jack. I always love talking with you.
See you.